Welcome to A Brief History Conspiracy.
This week's episode is all about the moon.
Okay, hi guys, it's 4.5 billion years ago. 4.51 billion years ago, actually. I think that one's important. It's only 100 million years, like that matters.
Orders of magnitude, probably not.
Yeah. So we're 4.51 billion years ago, and that's when the most recent studies have aged the moon. And you know how they did that, by the way?
Go on.
They got to the moon rocks, and they looked at something called zircon, which I'd never heard of. I thought that was the bad guy from Toy Story. Is that not Emperor Zircon?
Might be. My memory's not serving me too well from Toy Story.
Yeah, they look at the uranium decay in zircon and how much of the uranium decayed down into lead, and they aged the moon 4.51 billion years ago. Smashed you with the science. So why do we think that the moon is important? Why are we actually talking about it?
I suppose it's mainly because it acts as a stabiliser for the current conditions that are hospitable to life on the planet Earth, really.
Yeah. I saw something not long ago that said that the North Pole, because you've got the actual North Pole where the pole is where Santa lives.
Yep.
And then you've got the magnetic North Pole, and that wanders a fair bit, but only by about 30 miles or something. It doesn't wander a great deal. It's going east though. It is wandering. It's heading there, on about the magnetic poles flipping.
Yeah.
It's moving a couple of inches a year at the moment, more than they would
More
like.
than it normally does. Okay.
So
that's
it's shifting. So the moon being where it is though helps our pole stay stable. So the magnetic North Pole. If it wasn't for that, the magnetic North Pole would wander from where it is now all the way down to the equator and back again, as some studies suggest. So that couldn't be good for our... I mean, can you imagine our seasons if the magnetic pole shifted that much? And that's because our Earth wobbles in its orbit. Our Earth would be wobbling in its orbit that much. Winter would... You wouldn't have regular seasons.
No, and you combine that with the precession of the equinox cycle, the 26,000 year cycle of the wobble of the axis.
Yes, exactly.
Of orbit. Combining that with...
Well, it would be a much quicker wobble, and it would be a much bigger wobble.
Yeah, it would.
I love the word wobble. We should say it more. We're going to say it a lot in this episode.
Probably an unused,
it's not used
relatively unused word. Yeah.
I think we need more wobble. I like wobble. So I should also say I'm horrifically hungover. So at any point I just sort of look wondrously into the camera. It's because I'm thinking about being sick. So. My voice is ruined as well. Can you hear that? My voice is
your voice is starting to go a little
half an octave deeper than it normally is. Drink. Bad for you, don't do it. The moon also takes quite a lot of hits for us as a planet.
It does,
look
yes.
up if you can see that from the thing again.
It's our second protector behind Jupiter, I suppose, really. Jupiter's the main protector that stops most of the big objects coming into the inner solar system.
Vacuum cleaner of the solar system. The Dyson of the solar system will support British engineering.
It's the next Dyson model, the Dyson Jupiter.
The Dyson Jupiter. They should do that. I can know. So yeah. It also one of the other reasons is it causes our tidal forces, but it causes our tidal forces just right. That again, it's stable. It mixes up the oceans really nicely. Yeah. We need a healthy ocean for a healthy body.
If all life in the ocean went tomorrow, all life on land would be dead within several years as well.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, we need that. And again, it causes the tidal movements that we need. We would still have tides if it wasn't for the moon. It would just be much, much weaker.
Yeah.
And the sun's pull would cause some tides, but nothing like
what the moon does, obviously, because of it being 400 times closer than the sun is to us.
And they think life starting on the Earth, which is what we talked about in the last episode, started in the oceans, and they think the tidal forces mixing up the amino acids and the nucleic acids and these sort of the tidal pools would have been where life probably initially kicked off. Egyptians, Mayans, they all had lots of mythology about the moon and the sun. But there were a lot of similarities between them.
Yes.
The moon was always seen as like this female bringer of life, and then the sun was like the hunter. a male hunter. I was wondering what the hell they thought. You know, occasionally when you look up and you can see the moon during the day. I always thought what the hell they thought was going on. Is that them like getting jiggy?
Yeah,
Sun and the moon are getting busy, sort of thing.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know what they'd have made of that, but yeah, seeing the moon in the daytime. Yeah. Even now, I'm quite amazed when you see the moon.
I saw it in the
daytime.
I was driving home about a week ago because obviously we've been researching this, and I drove home and saw the moon. I thought, oh, what have they thought of that? The moon and the sun are in the sky at the same time. And then I was just thinking about the moon and the sun having sex the whole way home. This is what I think about now we've started doing this. This is how this is what my life has turned into.
It's an interesting thought process.
It's weird. There are other theories about it. Well, we have the myth, we have the man in the moon, don't we? That's maybe a Western European thing, that the meteors look like a face. And so there's the man in the moon. There's an old story that I'd never heard about. There's a girl and a rabbit. Apparently it looks like a girl and a rabbit.
Okay.
And there's a rabbit in the moon.
I've vaguely heard of this, but I don't know if I've looked or tried to see the girl and the rabbit in the.
There's actually a recording of them during the 9/11, and they're flying up, and they're about a day out from the moon.
Right.
And Cape Canaveral calls up to Buzz, and says. Because, oh, you know, you're out there doing the report, and then they just say, you know, just let us know if you see a girl and a rabbit. And they go, ha 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 ha. I think it was code myself. Just let us know if you see any aliens, which we'll call a girl and a rabbit.
Well, it could quite possibly have been.
Because it's such a common myth that neither of us had ever heard of it before.
No, which is quite surprising, but I didn't realise the Apollo 11 guys had mentioned that either.
Yeah,
so
apparently. But there's lots of other myths that go back. We're going to mention the Anunnaki for the first time. This is something that's going to come up a lot. If you've never heard of the Anunnaki, get ready.
I'm guessing if you're watching this, you probably have heard of them.
Yeah, I think if you're remotely interested in this sort of crap, you'd have heard of Nibiru and Planet X. And but part of we'll go far more into detail as we go on. But there's basically a story that an Anunnaki have this planet Nibiru. Nibiru's moon. Nibiru comes around our solar system maybe for 3,600 years.
I think it's
3,600.
Yeah, they reckon there's some kind of body, don't they, on the outer edge of the solar system,
which is backed up with science. We should say
that backed up with science.
Yeah, science actually says there's an object or something that we haven't seen because it's messing with Neptune's
orbit.
Causes
perturbations in the orbit of various outer planets.
Oh, I was hoping you'd say Uranus, so I could go Uranus. But he didn't. He said outer bodies, bastard. And so we know we think there's a big option. I mean, when they found Pluto, they thought, oh, we found Planet X, and they realised, oh,
but unfortunately, its mass isn't big enough to coincide with the variances in the orbits that they're
still looking.
Noticing or observing, should I say, scientifically. So they're
still looking for this big object out there that we think. But one of those things is that it's called Nibiru, and there's aliens on there called the Anunnaki, which are giants that are related to the Nephilim, which is in the Bible, and it goes on, which we'll
I think the Bible refers to them as the Nephilim, but that is just another name for the Anunnaki, isn't it? I think that's just how different cultures have sometimes named different peoples with the different.
I think when we get into Petra, we'll talk about this again, because these guys were giants, and if you ever look at the Petra, we'll talk about
City of Petra, yes.
We'll get
very interesting ancient city.
But the myth goes with how the moon was created, was that one of the Nibiru's paths, it was whizzing by, Nibiru's moon slammed into the Earth, which then smashed off a section that turned into our moon. The rest of the Nibiru's moon then broke up and created the asteroid belt. So that's one other story, and that allows us to mention the Anunnaki for the first time.
I think it's a plausible mythological story.
Yeah.
There's not much scientific evidence for this yet, obviously, as we haven't found.
No, the Nibiru part.
We haven't found Planet X yet, and in order to prove that Planet X's Nibiru's moon collided with our planet, we'd need to know of the existence of Planet X or Nibiru first. But
I think this is one of those examples as well of if people that are really big in the Anunnaki and they take in a scientifically possible theory and attaching it to this thing. I mean, they take the Nephilim and all this sort of thing, and they've created Noah's Ark and all this sort of stuff that's in the Bible,
Yeah.
and said, oh, the Bible is actually this story of the Anunnaki, and had this thread all the way through. This is a similar thing. We're going to talk about the three big theories on how the moon was scientifically created, and one of those theories is that it was caused from another impact. So it sounds a bit like the Anunnaki people have gone, well, that was probably Nibiru's moon then, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And
So there's a bit
of cut and pasting.
There is a scientific theory about yes, our planet suffering an impact and the asteroid belt. It seems to make sense that the asteroid belt was once another planet. If you look at the spacing of the planets in the solar system, the asteroid belt is smack bang in that
between the
pattern
two.
of placing
It seems
where
to
you would see another.
I've always assumed it was a planet that just didn't form, but there's other theories.
But yeah, I suppose we don't really understand enough about accretion of matter in the formation of planets as
Every
well.
episode you come up with a word and I have to think, I know that word. And in my brain I'm going, go through this source. Accretion? I don't know.
I like to articulate, if you haven't noticed.
Just say words.
Okay.
No, it's a good word. I'm impressed. This is going to be an ongoing thing now where you'll say a word and everyone else will be looking at me going,
Does he know? Does he know what that means?
Has he lost us all, viewers? So we're going to discuss the Hopi tribe and a few other little myths that go with it as well, but I think we'll get to them when we actually get to that bit. So because I think it makes sense. But I think there's a couple of other myths about the moon that, when we discuss it, are actually pretty bloody close to what we think might be true. So right, the three main theories then. So we've got that it was made at the same time. So the planets, basically when our sun was formed, it was formed out of a giant gas cloud. The gravity sort of started pulling in bits towards the middle, created the sun first. That's why the sun's the largest object. And when the sun fired off, the rest of the gas cloud slowly formed into the planets. So it's a snowball effect. One rock hits another rock, it gets a bit bigger, pulls in more rocks. You slowly get planets, hot melting planets. That's, I think, why we see a structure. I think we mentioned in the first episode that when we've looked at other solar systems, there seems to be a pattern, and that would only make sense because the planets should have been made the same way regardless of where they were, depending on the stars, different. But
and we now know from the space telescopes, Hubble,
Kepler.
And Kepler, most have planetary systems, and about 1 in 10 have Earth-like planets within those planetary systems. So that's 20,
that's what we've seen. I think it's probably
20 billion potential habitable worlds in our galaxy.
And I don't think that should be any surprise, because like I said, there's the physics of how a solar system forms is going to be the same regardless. So, and
we're starting to. What my point was we're starting to observe that now with the planetary systems that we are able to observe around the stars. We're starting to see that it looks like that. It's almost like the. It's almost like it's commonplace to have a star with multiple planets orbiting around it, and this seems the common occurrence.
So there's the theory then that the moon would have formed at the same time through this process of like I can't call it snowball effect, but I think it's the best way of describing it. It's so that's the first theory. There was a few problems with the theory, which we'll talk about in a second. So the next is that actually it was a captured object, and by that the both of Mars's moons are captured objects, they believe. So there's a couple of issues with both of those theories though. When they did the math, it didn't make sense. The problem is the moon is quite unusual in our solar system.
Yes, it has many features that have no comparison to any other moon in our solar system. Well,
it's the second heaviest moon in the solar system, or the second highest mass object in the moon in the solar system. Which is weird when you consider there's 5 planets bigger than us, or 4 planets bigger than us. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune. We're not a very big planet compared to the planets.
There's much bigger planets.
You'd think the bigger planets would have bigger moons. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
it doesn't.
So yeah,
There's only one moon bigger. Io is bigger than
the
our
ratio
moon.
of the size of our moon to the size of the parent planet compared to the other moons and their parent planets in our solar system.
Exactly.
Far supersedes any
The
other.
moon is a quarter the size of the Earth.
Yes.
That ratio of 1 to 4 is nowhere near for the rest of the planets.
No. I don't even know what the
Io
nearest ratio is, but I imagine it's probably
it's one in a factor of hundreds. The only other moon that's bigger than our moon in the entire solar system is Io, that's around Jupiter, and obviously Jupiter is 1,000 times bigger than the Earth.
Yeah, it's
something like that.
Something
So that ratio is
ballpark,
going
yes.
to be 1 in 4. I don't know. I'm not doing the maths, but it's significantly higher than ours. So from a ratio point of view, no other moon comes near in our solar system.
No.
Its distance to the Earth is relatively unusual. Most of the other Mars, I'd like to say Mars
Most of the
moons
moons,
are much further away than the Earth, than the Moon is to us.
Yes.
So again, that's unusual. The reason why that's important for things like the captured object is that when they do the maths, the Moon, if the Moon got that close that it would be captured by us, it should have slammed into us. It should have hit us.
Yeah.
The maths just does not add up to how it would go into a nice orbit, as well as the fact that the Moon's orbit is unusual because one side of the Moon always faces the Earth. It's a geosynchronous orbit.
Yeah. Well, tidally locked, isn't it?
Tidal locked orbit.
Yeah.
Which is again, we don't see that anywhere else in our solar system. If it was formed at the same time as the Earth,
Yep.
then it should have an orbit similar, but it doesn't. It has a very stable round orbit, which is unusual. Most orbits are like egg-shaped, and it has this tidal locked orbit, which is unusual.
Yeah, which is very unusual. I don't think any of the moons. I think that's probably a product or a feature of it being so close to us is why it's tidally locked, and because they're.
So there's another theory came out with that was the Moon was formed from an impact. So an object they call Theia, about the size of Mars. I don't know how they know this, but they reckon it's about the size of Mars. Hit the Earth, but it just clipped it, and a big chunk came off.
Yeah, kind of like a glancing blow.
A glancing blow. And there is some evidence to support this because I've got some images of the Earth, and it does look like if you remove the oceans, 'cause obviously the Earth looks nice and round, but the ocean's going to fill in the gaps.
Yes, the oceans. Yeah, make
in
the
and
circle.
around the area of the Mariana Trench and this sort of thing. I've got an image basically which I'll put up about of the Earth, and it does look like a massive bite's been took out of the Earth. It's like an apple. And that does you do look at that and think, it does look like a chunks fell off.
So it kind of supports this impact theory, obviously.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
that spins round, and the Moon then very slowly, the Earth takes its licks, the Moon cools down and forms back into its pattern, which then kind of makes sense of how close the Moon is to the Earth. So when they started doing the maths on that kind of made a little bit more sense. They could do the computer models to fit that. So then there was a couple of bits of science that kind of really started to confuse things. First of all, so they went to the Moon in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
Very annoying for the scientists that were trying to come up with this idea, because matter in the universe, when it forms together, it has like this signature, isotope signature.
Yes.
Different objects have different isotope signatures. When they looked at the Moon, they were expecting to see two distinct isotope signatures, because if it was a captured object, it would have a totally different isotope signature because it would have formed well away from us. If it was from an impact, it would have the same.
Yes.
When they looked at it, they had the same signature.
Yep.
But then somebody did the maths on how old the Moon is, and they came up with a number of 4.51 billion years by, as I mentioned, looking at zircon element, and the uranium in that decays at a certain rate, which is understood. Uranium decays into lead. By looking at the levels of lead in zircon, they can figure out how old the Moon is, and it's 4.51 billion years old. Small problem.
Right.
That's older than the Earth.
Yes.
By about 100 million years, in that, give or take. Right. Okay. So, YouTube exploded with that knowledge. Because if the moon is older than the Earth, then none of these theories can be right. It can't have created at the same time. It can't have, but it maybe was a captured object. It could be a captured object.
Captured object still, yep.
But the maths doesn't support it being a captured object. There's no natural way the moon could have sat in the orbit that it's in if it's a captured object.
I think the...
Love that end. This shouldn't be a theory anymore. This is conclusive. And it's spoiler. Again, it isn't.
Yeah, and the size of the moon compared to the size of the sun are exactly right to create a solar eclipse.
It's almost like someone did it on purpose.
It's a Neptunian 237.
Which sounds like an evil Bond villain material. I have built a Neptunian bomb. It'll destroy the... And I think we should go through this entire series and never ever mention it again.